This video is going to be called Why Studying in Space is So Important. Now, basically, because the world is spinning and I want to study the fabric of space, the fabric of the universe, the fabric of time, the fabric of existence. These, these, when you rip the universe apart with particles, when you're on an Earth that's spinning, you're not getting the fabric of the particles. You're getting the particles that are moving with you. You know what I mean? You're getting the particles that are affected by gravity, not the forces that aren't affected by gravity. So all the forces, when you do your experiment, just spin off. Like when you do particle experiments and you do fabric of the universe experiments, when you're moving, when you're moving on Earth that is spinning, on a planet that is spinning, or if you're orbiting a planet and you haven't stopped in space completely, like unless you stop in space completely, your space is going to move on you. So every time you shoot a particle, it moves over there. Like all the forces that you created are actually way over there right now. And when you get into space and you stop, you can now do particle experiments and have your particle forces and fab and your measurements through the fabric of the universe, the fabric of space. Um, right there, you can actually see them this time. This time you have them and you can see them and you can study them. So studying in space is important. That's where I hear dimensions was discovered, was in space. You got to stop in space and you got to study the fabric of the universe, the fabric of space, the fabric of existence. And this is a way to travel too, because there's other dimensions out there and stuff to discover, right? Like, um, oh, so you have to think of how am I going to grab this fabric? How am I going to study this fabric? How am I going to affect this fabric? How can I create forces that bend and break the universe as we see it and as we know it? And will this give me something? Will this give me something that lets me play with the fabric of the universe or study the fabric of the universe? Can I create effects? Can I create special effects in special conditions and as a way of gripping and touching something in another dimension or another universe or in the fabric of space or the fabric of particles or measure or the forces that are created around it. So this is where quantum is interesting because they break, seems like they break particles into another world and bring them back, just like electricity sort of comes from another world and goes back to it, right? Like it's in another dimension and it comes to our dimension and then goes back to the other dimension that it's from. So quantum and electricity are kind of interesting like that. But and they're moving with us, and they seem to create little bit structures and experiments that they confine them and they move with us. Yeah, if they're confined, they move with us. If they're not confined, they don't move with us. Notice that. So if you can confine the particles, maybe the particles will move with you. But for particles that you can't confine, and for forces that you can't confine, like we don't have a lot of forces. You got magnetic force. I don't know if you want to call electrical another side of magnetic force, or the other half. Exactly, electrical doesn't seem like the other half of magnetic force either. Magnetic seems to be like the bigger half of the two forces that are directly related in a lot of ways. So it seems like there's a lot of potential in magnet power, and understanding supermagnets and directionals and the directions and like jacking a magnet would be huge. It'd be far huger than jacking electricity because you can jack electricity after you jack a magnet. But creating like a huge magnetic force out of nowhere and discovering all the properties to magnetic forces. Where the flip side is electricity in a lot of ways. But it's not like a 50-50 relationship, I don't think. I think there's I think there's another variable in there. There's electricity, magnet, and something else. But we don't have a lot of forces like we got velocity and stuff like that. But this this is where we push particles, move particles, and particles flow with us, right? It's like throwing a ball. You can throw a ball. That's kind of a force. So we need the cool forces. We need the special effects, the super duper forces, the special effects, dimensional forces, dimensional balances, quantum, the electrical, magnetic matrix of superpowers that you can get and special effects that you can get. Start grabbing at things. Like remember my to get dimensional particles, I took a hammer. I took my speed of light spaceship, my speed of light magnetic hovering thing, and I rammed it into the ground as hard as I can as a hammer and hit the particles into superheat. And superheat hit them as hard as I can and pulled out particles that had dimensional attributes to them now. So in the highest heat that I could, at the highest velocity that I could, smash them together, I collected dimensional particles in my mind. That was in my mind what I thought would happen. Might lose a lot of dimensional particles actually. Then you think about the other end of doing it cold. Cold and slow might attract a dimensional balance that you could use. You might create a balance that you can use dimensionally and pull things from other dimensions with these balances. You can create two sides of a balance and stuff like that. See, if you create 2 or 3 balances that work together, you might be able to pull something in the fabric of the universe with using them together and balancing them out together and creating balance between them. Anyway, this is why it's so important to study in space, is because you can stop. It's because you can stop and study particles and forces and powers and electricity and special effects and the gauntlet that I was talking about, where I got all my CAT scans, MRIs, LiDARs, sonars, guitar effects, pedals. I got everything, lasers that you can possibly get in there, and I try to make more robot sensors. The gauntlet, having a gauntlet in space would be supremo, because you could actually, like I said, the forces don't move on you. The particles don't move over there on you every time you use them. Right? You can see the actual matrix, the actual fabric of the universe in space, and where the particles move according to the fabric of space as opposed to according to the pilot of Earth. Alright. See, I can be smart sometimes, but I'll wait to the afterlife to get smart again, I guess.